Oh, hey. So today I'm going to go back to my series on comparing areas, regions of death metal. It's going to be Asia, Greater Asia versus Japan. So it's kind of like World War II redone. Going to give Japan another chance here. Japan, while I guess they got the benefit of being occupied for several years, I believe the better part of a decade, post-World War II, so they got that cultural boost. They got a lot of influences from the West, so to speak. So there was always growing niche areas in Japanese culture where they would kind of mimic Western, like biker gangs, for example, rockabilly, and even just jeans wearing or baseball. But I think actually baseball got popular in Japan before World War II, but that's a whole other thing. So we're going to compare the best 3 death metal bands, early stuff. So we're talking the 90s, 80s from Japan and wherever else in Asia was able to produce any at that time. Nowadays with the internet, it's not so difficult to have those influences come in and be able to create your own project, as long as you have, electricity and there's enough people around. You need to form a band, but I mean, one-man band sort of thing. And I think you'll kind of notice the countries that were able to produce any at this time did have some external Western influences, that historical connections, like with the British Empire, or maybe even more contemporary with just the more geographically close Australia and those kind of Western influences. So you'll see there aren't a lot to choose from at this point in time, but they are good ones. So stick with me. So we're going to start in Singapore. They actually have a pretty interesting history, the history of that nation or city-state, actually. But no more boring stuff. Right to the metal. Band called a demo band. I don't think they've ever advanced beyond that. This is a band called Euronymous. I don't think it was a tribute to the Mayhem, the Norwegian band, as much as it probably was drawn from, I would assume, the Hellhammer song, because that was known by that point in the underground circles. Anywho, the aesthetic here looks a lot more black metal, but check it out. It's definitely death metal. Maybe higher quality than you would expect from a place like Singapore at this point in time. Check it out. All right, so what do you think of that? Looks black metal, but definitely death metal. Now we're going to move a little bit north, across the bridge. I've actually been over that bridge. Anywho, this is Suffercation. Kind of silly name, but it was definitely a play on Suffocation, because Suffocation had already made an impact by this point. 92 is the by Suffercation that I would recommend, and they are definitely leaning into that more brutal death metal style. And I would make an argument that this might be the heaviest thing to come out of not just Southeast Asia, but all of Asia by this point. Give it a listen. Let me know what you think. All right, pretty damn heavy, wouldn't you say? Now, we're going to move over to the most populous nation of all of Southeast Asia. In fact, it's also the world's most populous Muslim nation, but people don't tend to think of that. Talking about Indonesia, of course, like 11,000 islands. This isn't a geopolitical channel, but I do want to point out the most recent prime minister, the one that's just out of office maybe a year or two ago, was a big metalhead. Joko, I can't remember his name. Just look at the pictures here. I might take back what I said about Suffercation being the heaviest thing from Asia from the 90s. Rotten corpse. This is heavy stuff, quality stuff. Actually, and for whatever reason, as far as I can tell, very unknown. Check it out. Let me know what you think. So those are the three from Asia. We're going to keep up the heavy theme as we move into Japan. Band called Remnants. Kind of a stupid name, right? Maybe you presuppose that it would be a gore grind band or something more of that ilk. But no, this is squarely death metal, but heavy as shit death metal. So I know sometimes those sounds overlap one another, but I would not put this in my my gore grind. If you like gore grind, check these out right here. Good stuff. The one thing I do look for an explanation on, can somebody let me know? The Cypress Hill skits included on this release?
I don't know, man.
Weird, right? Anywho.
Oh yeah, we think we did. Do you know Insane in the Brain?
So what'd you think of that? Could you consider that to be slam? I mean, I guess if you consider internal bleeding to be slam, it's almost at the level, not quite devourment. I don't know where your cutoff is. Definitely not my favorite sort of death metal by any means, but interesting that there was slam going on in the 90s outside of the US. I think that's pretty rare. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm nowhere near an expert on that genre. But for a number of reasons that kind of stood out for me, from being from Japan. But Japan isn't known for their slam, as far as I know. I don't know if they're really known for any kind of death metal style in general. There isn't like Japanese death metal. There's doom death and an array of death metal. I don't need to go through the genres with you. So I'm going to suggest one of the earliest ones that I'm aware of. Not the earliest one I was aware of, but the earliest one that I'm aware of that existed. Anywho, Transgressor. They got all the old school tropes going on because, I mean, they are old school. This is got, I would say, influences from both US and European death metal, the contemporary stuff. Floridian death metal more so than Chicago or New York style death metal, coupled with maybe the Northern European style death metal. It's kind of grimy and sharp at the same time, if that makes sense. Maybe fans of Incantation, Infestor. Not that all these bands all sound the same, but I would say going off of the same vibe. I'm talking too much. Just check it out. This is quality stuff that, for whatever reason, I didn't know about until maybe 10 years ago. Check it out. Before we get to my final example from Japan, there's a few other early Japanese death metal releases I want you to check out. They're all significantly different from one another, yet still fall under the death metal banner. From that same year, we have Multiplex. Strange name. I don't know. It's more of a death grind sound. The following year, a band called Hellchild. They changed their genre multiple times. Started as a hardcore band in the 80s, and by the end of the 90s they were kind of a groovy alternative metal. Where Conflict reaches, that's the sweet spot for them. Maybe people know them from their splits with like Discordant Axis, Converge, Bongzilla. All that stuff's kind of meh to me, just kind of outside of my main area of interest, but I need to stay on top. And then in 94, Defiled had a EP, which was probably the first brutal death metal release from that country. All right, and the final one, you probably already know this. I would call this melodic death metal for people who don't like melodic death metal. It's not mellow death. I don't know. Do you separate melodic death metal and mellow death in your head, or are they actually the same thing? In my mind, they're different from one another. I don't know. If you're a fan of Arghoslent, it doesn't sound like Arghoslent, but if you're a fan of Arghoslent, I could see you enjoying this. Intestine, Baalism. I don't like the name. I don't like the artwork. And in fact, those two things kept me from listening to it or checking it out years ago. I mean, this was talked about upon its release. People knew about it, but I guess limited funds and not really having a way to listen to things before you purchase them back in the day usually just prevented me from checking it out until a lot more recently. I guess I'd seen them mentioned with Children of Bodom a few times, and when I checked Children of Bodom out, I wasn't impressed, so I kind of like, I guess I'm not going to check them out either, but I was wrong. And if you haven't checked them out either for any of those reasons or any other reasons, here's the opportunity. Oh yeah, some more Wheedly. Those Japanese, they are good. They're perfectionists. And it really shows. Check out my Asian black metal video and my Japanese crust punk video. Now on to the answer. I got all the numbers totaled here. I know who won. I know who won World War II 2.0. But I think this is kind of a big deal. And in fact, there is a press conference being held right about now. So join me while we watch that, and we will find out who had the best death metal from the 80s and 90s.
Want to be able to present it in as a professional manner as possible. This is a historical event. Will Japan be able to exact a revenge on those Asian nations that they could not best in World War II? So, comparing the death metal output from the 90s from those Asian nations versus Japan, here, in honor, let's pop into these babies. That was good. All right. So, another one. So Asia, all of Asia. Okay, do you understand during World War II how fucked up things were? There was a point where Thailand, who was allied with Japan, they didn't allow themselves to be taken over. They saw the writing on the wall. But, so while Thailand was, prior to that, had some French forces in their land, well, they decided they wanted them out at that time. But by that point, those forces were controlled by Vichy France, which was allied with Nazi Germany, which was allied with Japan, which was allied with Thailand. But you see how messed up it is? So I'm wondering, we'll be able to sort all that out here. And definitely Japan wins. It wasn't a doubt in anybody's mind, was it? Now, admittedly, the rest of Asia has come up in the 2000s with their death metal. They really seem to lean into that brutal death metal and that slam a lot more than anything else. Japan sure has some of their examples in the 2000s of that style also, but Japan seems to be much more diverse and go into those niche areas with their death metal. So I would say to this day, Japan still dominates the rest of Asia with their death metal. But let's have one more, because it's kind of even now. Japan lost World War II, but they did win the death metal contest, so we got to have a tiebreaker here, right? Can't leave it just mismatched like this. So let's do horror films. Who has the best horror films? So I'm going to give you my top 6 Japanese horror films versus the top 6 general Asian horror films. Hold on, I can't do it off the top of my head. Give me 1 second. You know what? These are delicious. Anywho, so let's start with Japan. A lot of people know a lot of Japanese horror. It became pretty mainstream post 2000, right after the millennium. Japanese horror became mainstreamed. But I'm not going to focus on that stuff so much. In fact, first one I'm going to go with does come from that era. You probably know it. Tokyo Gore Police. Next one I'm going to go with is One Cut of the Dead. Now that's a mockumentary horror film. Really intersection of some of my favorite genres there. Check that one out if you don't know that one. Also going to suggest, how about Godzilla, the classic Godzilla from 1954. People don't consider Godzilla a horror film, have never seen it. The lighting,
mood, the atmosphere, the music, everything in that. It is a horror film, and it is fantastic. It's a classic. It's not goofy. I'll tell you what is goofy. My next one, Happiness of the Categories. That's some goofy horror. Mixes all the genres, and I do mean all the genres. Check that one out. That's a must-see. And how about Shin Godzilla, the most Lovecraftian of all the Godzillas? That's a horror film. I don't care what anybody says. It counts, and for my favorite of all the ones, we're getting ultra goofy here. Another one that mixes all the genres. House from 1977. Yeah, the 86 American House is pretty damn good, but the 77 House, then when you're talking to somebody and they mention that one, you know they're real. And I'm real. All right. I don't know why I did that. Let's see. So, Asian horror film. All right, these things got me fucking fired up, bro. I don't know. I went through the whole list. I didn't realize it wasn't recording. So we're gonna go again. Category 3, Hong Kong horror film, The Untold Story. Now that's a fucked up movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. One of those 90s Category 3 films that there was a glut of them that were actually well worth your time to check out. I'm going to go with Men Behind the Sun is another one of those Category 3. That was an 80s one, and I do consider that a horror film. Horrific, definitely. Some of you might even consider a war film. I see it tagged as that sometimes also, but that's a horror film. You got to check it out. It is fucked up. Unit 273, 271. I'll put the right one on here. How about Mystics in Bali? Where the fuck's that head going? Jesus Christ, that's a messed up movie. Indonesian horror. That's a whole, Indonesian film is a whole other realm if you haven't checked it out. There's some nice exploring, some dives you could do into Indonesian film. But I'm going to go back over to Hong Kong with Hocus Pocus. Now that's the Hoppin' Vampires. Not my favorite of the Hoppin' Vampires one. There's a lot of good Hoppin' Vampires ones once you get into that set. But start with Mr. Vampire, the classic. Mr. Vampire kind of broke off into a few different paths, kind of like the Living Dead series has, where it broke off into multiple different paths. But start with the original Mr. Vampire. There's several good ones in that series. But for my favorite of all the Asian horror films, outside of Japan that is, because House is a winner, is We're Gonna Eat Ya. Now this is one of those classics where they intersect different sort of horror genres together, and this came out right at the peak cannibal time. I have a video on the cannibal films. You got to check that out. But for whatever reason, I had not seen this movie at that time, so I don't even mention it in there, and this is the best of all the cannibal films. You in the comments.
Who wins?
Can the rest of the Asian countries redeem themselves with the horror films? Let me know based on your thoughts on horror films in the comments.
Who wins?
I'm gonna fucking go. Suffercation. Kind of silly name, right? But it was definitely play on Suffocation because they were known by this time. The time this demo came out was 92.